webinar is being recorded so that we can put it on the website and people can access it, and they can pick out, they can follow the presentation at a later date. With the idea of this is we're in a phase of consultation on how we can increase recruitment into our industry, improve the training and the competency of those within the industry. And that's not to criticize the existing provision, but look at linking the pathways between the marine, the inland, and the consultancy sides of the industry, such that there's some common threads which run through them all, which would aid movement between the different elements of the industry, but actually retain people within the industry, as opposed to people saying, oh, I'm pissed off with working for so-and-so, and then they leave the industry and don't stay in it. So the idea of, so the consultation, and I hope you've had the opportunity to read the consultation document, which has been circulated. And this is really an attempt to consult with members, those who've got an interest in it, those who've got careers within it, such that we can get your feedback on what is effectively some ideas that we're putting forth, some formed ideas that we're presenting at this stage. So if I sort of discuss the background to it initially, since when I was at LCM Environmental, and to most member companies that I talk to on a pretty regular basis, they never seem to have enough men, or not enough men. They never have enough staff to do the jobs for which they have work. And it's a devil's own job to recruit good, trained people who are motivated and want to do the work that we do. And there's a real, you know, people are really chasing resources at the moment. There's lots of factors for this. I think one of them is Brexit has made it difficult, because it's taken hundreds and hundreds or thousands of people out of construction. And so people are being drawn into construction when perhaps possibly, and some of those have gone from our industries. But basically there's now a competition for resources, and there's a high competition for well-trained and motivated and well-qualified resource. At the same time, possibly because of reactivation of the industry, of industry generally after COVID, the industry is very busy. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of infrastructure which is failing, particularly on the marine side. There's a lot of work which is not being done because of COVID. You know, the industry is working really hard at the moment. We're also involved in a transition to new fuels, and they're going to expose the oil and gas industry and the users of those fuels to new risks. Those risks need to be managed, and therefore responders need to be prepared to help companies manage those new risks. For all those reasons, at the moment, the industry is growing, and most companies I talk to are busy and they have plenty of work. Now, generally, people in our industry actually enjoy being in our industry, and I'm sure that they're retained by their companies if they feel that the work that they do is interesting, that they're well paid, that they're well motivated, and that they feel that they've got a reasonable balance between the work which they do, which is interesting, and you know, life away from work. But the question that we've been trying to address as a group really is, how do we meet the demand for the right sort of people to come into our industry? So after lots of discussions, particularly in the UK Spill Board, we set about thinking, how can we address this? So we decided to form the Employment Opportunities Working Group, and the objective of it is through collaborative working to generate and evolve career pathways for the industry and to promote these, to provide those within the industry and those who seek to join it clear career pathways which people are aware of when they join the industry, and they're aware of them as they work their way along their career pathway. and then devise a communication strategy so that a career in our industry is attractive and recognized as worthwhile and rewarding. And so what happened was we got a small group, we got an ad hoc group of people together, and we discussed some of these issues. And really the initial findings were that there is a clear issue in that we face a competition for resources, and we aren't always winning that competition. And so therefore we're short of resources. I think everyone who's in the industry, particularly those who've been in it a while, appreciate that there are great career opportunities, and we need to tell people about them, and we're not good at telling people about them. And I think sometimes, you know, we don't promote our industry to other industries. And the other factor which is becoming increasingly an issue is we're often challenged, particularly by local authorities, sometimes by loss adjusters, by people that we may be working for. We're often challenged to prove competence, particularly on inland spills, where a lot of the training is done in-house, and it's not always independently accredited. So a lot of people do quite a lot of courses, but they're not always accredited courses, which might be accredited by by ISAS, our own accreditation body, as a course which has been approved by them, or they're not externally accredited courses. The other findings were that whilst marine spill response has an established progression from MCA 1 to 5, and we'll come on and talk about those, inland and consultancy lack such an obvious and clear career pathway. And this means that individuals who are thinking of their own career, as they should, do not realize how transferable their skills are from one part of the industry to another, and therefore they leave rather than move within the industry. And a good analogy is that, you know, there are on the marine side of the industry, I would guess there are very, very few people who haven't worked at Oil Spill Response Limited, and some people have probably worked at Oil Spill Response maybe 2 or 3 times during their career. They've left it, they've gone and done something else, they've gone to work for somebody else in marine spill response, and they've seen an opportunity, applied for it, and they've gone back to oil spill response. And so people on the marine side do tend to move around the well-known companies, Briggs, Braemar, stroke Ambipar, NRC, marine oil spill response, and maybe others. And they do tend to move around in that environment. Possibly, and there's less movement of people on the inland side, and sometimes there isn't as much movement on the consultancy side. So we need to make sure that people have the skills to move within the industry as a whole. So what happened was we then formally formed the group, the group members were Martin Brannock, who is the MD of RSK Response, Mark Shepherd, who is the Operations Director of NRC, Neil Marson, who primarily worked in the inland and marine side, Steve Guy, who's our auditor, and he's worked primarily. He's done a lot of marine training and inland training, and I, through my own experience, has really been through the inland side of things. So it became clear to us that there's a requirement to future-proof the industry for the challenges and opportunities of the transition for net zero, and provide a structure that enhances training, respects experience, and ensures a supply of competent resource from the industry. So that was what we sort of thought initially, and what we then looked at is what is the current training provision. So on the marine side, you have MCA 1 to 5, and they take you all the way from basically being a level 1, being a completely new spill responder, right up to being a complex incident commander. And generally, you do each stage with approximately 2 or 3 year gap between each stage. The courses are delivered by independent training providers or accredited companies. The syllabi are tightly controlled. There is a criticism in that, but it is tightly controlled. And, you know, because the principal stakeholder, Maritime and Coast Guard Agency, has a tight control on the content of the course. That means it can possibly lag what the users want the content to have, but there's a fairly active review process which goes on. So there is a clear, so if you go in on the marine side, you start at number 1 and you move through till number 5, and you know where you stand within that career, within that marine side of that marine career. On the inland side, a lot of training is delivered in-house, with some external courses that are ISAS accredited, and we have 6 companies who provide courses which are ISAS accredited. Some of those run specialist courses, which are a little bit more complex than a basic spill response course, and the providers of those are generally Compass, Oracle, GPT Environmental. The other providers who run accredited courses generally provide basic courses to companies who've got a spill risk. It could be someone who, let's say, I don't know, is a manufacturing or a food processing company which might have fuel on site and they have a spill risk. And these courses are run, they do a good job, but actually they're not interested in doing more in-depth technical spill response courses, such as those that Compass, Oracle, and GPT Environmental provide. On the consultancy side, they buy in quite a lot of external courses, but a lot of the training is delivered in-house. Now, on the inland side, and to a degree, and on the consultancy side, and on the marine side, there is quite a lot of in-house course provision. Now, I'm not saying that isn't valuable, and it is, because it's usually delivered by experienced people. But there is also a lot of learning on the job, which isn't necessarily documented. So, and as I say, some people substitute training for learning on the job because they see training. So in some cases, they see training as non-productive time and therefore expensive, and they don't always see it as an investment in knowledge and in progression. Now, having said all that, which sounds critical, it's not meant to be, the recent experience of complex incidents, such as the Llangennec derailment in South Wales, which was a significant inland spill, it brought together lots and lots of inland response and marine response companies to deal with it. But that was dealt with extremely competently. We've had the marine side as being particularly stretched with MV Express Pearl, which was a container ship which caught fire, had one container which caught spontaneous combustion. It ended up burning out the whole vessel with significant environmental consequences because the contents of all of those containers, which also included a lot of plastic nurdles, ended up on Sri Lankan beaches. And that was well handled by our marine response companies. And all of those were again involved in the Ocasio, which was actually another complex spill, particularly as it involved a loss of very low sulfur fuel oil. I mean, it demonstrated that our training systems are far from broken. However, I think the lessons which came out of those incidents, one of those would be that actually training could be improved. And I don't think that anyone would ever sit down and say that training can never not be improved. So what is the training provision at the moment? So if you look in blue at the top, it's basically the basic training is on the marine side is MCA 1, MCA 2, MCA 3, MCA 4, and MCA 5. And they would relate in a sense to some of the categories that I've put on the inland and consultancy side. And if you looked at what we generally have, most people on the inland and consultancy side will do a formal basic spill response course. They may then do an in-house, or they may do a subcontracted or a externally provided advanced spill response course. And I think since Compass have started their tactical spill response course, some companies are moving their site manager training. They may supplement their in-house provision with sending their more senior people, their site managers and site supervisors who run their spills, on that tactical spill responder course. There used to be on-scene commanders courses and incident commander courses run by the Fire Service College, but in generally, and I used to send my more senior guys are certainly on the on-scene commander courses, but actually that doesn't generally happen now because the provision is very, there's not a great provision of those courses. And in addition, as I say, for all aspects of training, there's quite a lot of in-house provision. And this may be courses which are externally designed, but they have train the trainer rights to deliver those courses on behalf of the course provider. So that's basically summarizes where we are now. So the initial conclusions that the group came up with is that the system is far from broken, but it could be improved. And that the marine pathway, MCA 1 to 5, is the only clearly defined pathway from effectively, start of career to end of career, but it provides a good model. Apart from the marine side, there is not a great deal of independent certification, and by independent I mean institutionally wise, institute provision of certification. Now the MCA, I would say that is externally independently certified courses, because it's the whole training process is overseen by the MCA. And we thought that independent certification would certainly add value. It would provide and help to provide a common pathway. And it would also if you turn up and you're independently certified by an established external body, your training will carry more weight in front of your client, like a local authority or an insurance company or whatever. So those were the first ones. We agreed really that there's probably too much reliance on in-house and not accredited training provision. I think training must reflect the change in risk that we're starting to go through. And a lot of training being in-house provision means that the individual is lost in the system. And yeah, okay, we've got a spare afternoon, so we're going to talk about this and that. Is that recorded on the individual's training record? And is that individual training recognized as part of the individual's competence? And I think sometimes there is little recognition of achievement and experience on the inland, on the consultancy side. And if you're trying to market our inland, particularly inland and consultancy careers, there's little to attract people in, because they can't see a defined pathway that they can fit into or that they can drop into. So after much thinking, the proposal really was that we wanted to establish clear career pathways that are visible, distinct and transparent for marine, inland and consultancy careers. We needed to link to an independent accredited body to provide certification at key career stages. And we wanted to ensure the emphasis was on individual rather than collective competency, individual qualification, and to stress the importance of continuing professional development. So that's really what our proposal is about. So I'm really going to talk a little bit more about the proposal. So what we wanted to do was to provide independent certification. I think for the individual, it means that they know that they've passed something which is not been an in-house course and they've just attended and they've got a tick in the box at the end of it. It has actually been independently certified, and it's an independent certification of competence at a particular career stage. So we looked around and we thought that these qualifications were most relevant. Registered environmental technician, registered environmental practitioner, chartered environmentalist, and for some, chartered scientists. Now, these are independently, publicly recognized certifications, and we would ally with the Institute of Environmental Science to provide that independent certification bodies. And individuals at the time when they're applying for these certifications, would join the institute, and they would become members of the institute, and they would then follow that process through. And so that is where, and these are the levels at which we're thinking that people would have sufficient body of knowledge and experience to warrant the award of those certifications. So the registered environmental technician would probably be a senior spill operative with plus or minus 5 years experience. The registered environmental practitioner would probably be an experienced site supervisor. He's probably got plus or minus 7 years experience. Chartered environmentalist would probably be an experienced incident commander or an on-scene commander with plus or minus 10 years experience in the industry. And a chartered scientist would be similar, but effectively they are more on the science, investigatory, and an analytical side. Now, the importance about these is that these certifications remain with the individual and not the company. And to give an indication of fees, that gives you an indication of what the costs are. I would argue that they're not, some institutes for the same qualifications charge a lot more than the Institute of Environmental Science, and that's not to dish the Institute of Environmental Science. We looked at the Chartered Institute of Waste and Environmental Management, the Institute of Water, and things like that. But actually, this seemed to be a middle range of pricing from a very respected institution. Bear in mind that these costs are tax deductible because they're memberships of institutions and professional bodies. And I know that might not seem that is relevant, but it shouldn't be the key driver for getting certified. So what are we looking at to get certification? Basically, it's a summary of a list of practical experience through a logbook. And that logbook would typically include dates of incidents, the type of incident it is, the role undertaken in attending that incident, the products that were involved in it, the equipment that was used, the location of it, and anything which stands out about that incident. It could have been a very complex railway derailment. It involved multiple different risks, multiple different products, and it's just understanding what that institute is. The training record in a training logbook, which would probably be part of one logbook, which is basically contains certificates for external and internal training, any CPD courses attended, the dates of these, and the number of points that would have been awarded for those CPD courses. Any formal education that is obtained, obviously some may start with degrees, some may start with diplomas, some may start with NVQs, but there will be other vocational training courses undertaken in one's career, such as a site manager safety training course, site supervisor safety training scheme course, NEBOSH, Tech IOSH, you name it. There could be all sorts. And then, of course, examples of work delivered. So these might be spill incident reports, training courses delivered, case studies of spills that have been done and attended, examples of leadership, and in particular, what sustainable initiatives have been undertaken. So those are the sort of components for certification. And as you would expect, as you move more senior, from registered environmental technician up to chartered environmentalist, you would expect to see them being a little bit more heavyweight, a little bit more complex, the instance being a little bit more complex, and the role of the individual within them having more weight. So what is the proposed training structure? So within marine, it's similar to that. And there is the marine MCA 1 to 5. And look at the industry in industry experience, which is generally the course which is generally followed on MCA 1 to 5. On the consultancy side, generally people start off as a junior environmental consultant, become an environmental consultant, then move up. And at some point along the way, they will pick up a whole load of other qualifications through in-house courses or possibly external courses. And on the inland side, we're still looking at spill responder, small incident work supervisor, site incident supervisor, incident manager, major incident. And an incident manager is a single location complex incident. So it might be as a result of a fire where there's lots of different products involved. The spill is reasonably complex, but it's in one site. And the major incident commander will be multiple location and a complex instance. So that might be an incident which has occurred in an industrial estate which has impacted more than one site. And what are we looking at? So for the inland or equivalent for the marine, on the marine side, so spill responder course would be typically a one-day classroom and practical course. To support it and to make the person competent to go out, we would expect companies to provide additional training, some of which is certificated. So it could be, if they're likely to be ever entering water, a water awareness course. If they're going to be on a vessel of any type, say part of their accreditation is dealing with spills on inland waters, they would have to have some form of independent certification to do that. We'd expect people to have working at heights, because they may well be working at heights. They may not be going into confined spaces, but they need to have confined space awareness. And there will then be a string of other mandatory sort of training, which is done annually, gas detectors, stuff like that, asbestos awareness, Legionnaires awareness training, all sorts of things to just prepare someone to be a spill responder. And one would expect to see that logged. And then basically the next stage would be responding to and managing oil and biofuel spill incidents, which would probably be a 2-day classroom and practical course. We'd expect at that level people to get an understanding of how an incident command system works, because you as a responder may be working for a company which is also working for as a subcontractor to another company who's running part of a major incident. And understanding what the general incident command system structure is quite important, so that you know where you fit within the overall scheme of a major incident. And we'd expect at that stage training to become a little bit more complex, i.e. perhaps having breathing apparatus and confined space training, or other equivalent trainings related to the accreditation that the company does and the work that the company does. I would argue that some trainings perhaps should be given at this stage on chemical hazards, because these are likely to become more prolific as we move from hydrocarbons into less harmful fuels, many of which might well be chemicals. And then we'd move on into responding to and managing large spills, including biofuels and non-complex chemical incidents, a 3-day classroom and practical course. Again, further training at 2 days of it on incident command. So in other words, we're preparing the site supervisors, site managers, if you like, for running these types of incidents, where they may be playing a lead role in aspects of this incident. And we would expect them then to have chemical hazard awareness and chemical spill response training, as well as supporting training to enable them to be competent to handle that. And you'll see that this links then into the independent certification. Responding to the next level would be responding to and managing complex spill incidents, including hazardous and noxious substances. This would be quite a complex course, because you're really moving from while single location, these are complex multiple spill risk incidents, whereas the third level is really, they are non-complex. They're primarily oil spill or biofuel spill incidents, and they're non-complex chemical in nature. Again, emphasis on the command structure, because in these instances, you're definitely going to be dealing with fire and rescue services and other emergency services. And therefore, at that level, we would expect people to attend an incident command course level 1. And for the complex incidents and to being a complex incident commander, there's a 5-day, it's a five-day classroom and practical course, some of which is done at the Fire Service College. Again, an emphasis on the incident command system. They would be an incident, they would follow the training of the incident manager, but there would be far more emphasis on, at this level, on communication skills, working with across agencies. You're here managing the risks on behalf of the significant customer, because these are complex incidents. So I'm just going, it's hard to show it all the way through, but there are then these other courses which one would expect that people would acquire as they moved up the qualification stages. And in some cases, people will naturally do this as part of their career progression, as companies manage the competence of the people within them. Now, the independent certification starts at really the second stage of someone's career, where they can then apply to become a registered environmental technician. Because that's the stage when they're getting a significant investment from a company in training. Registered environmental practitioner would come in at the site stroke incident supervisor. And we believe that people who've reached the incident manager level, and certainly the major incident commander level, will certainly be competent to become certified as chartered environmentalists. Now, those who go a slightly different career and follow the analytical side, at this sort of level experience within their career, they would be looking to go into the chartered scientists. So that's what we're looking at. So what we're trying to do is to produce common pathways for marine, inland, and consultancy careers built around independent certification. The focus is on increasing individual competence, emphasizing the importance of CPD, the importance of individual independent certification as a means of managing people, helping to manage people's career progression. There is no doubt that to do this, it will require people to have more training and possibly more external training. But as risks change, and they are going to change, and we're already seeing that change occurring, that training will be vital to ensure personnel safety. Now, we'd like to start to introduce this, subject to the feedback from consultation, in Q1 2023. And as we start to introduce this, it will enable us to market spill and pollution response as a profession, and that should increase interest in it, and will help over time to overcome the resource issues that we now experience. And where are we going to market this to? Well, I would certainly be marketing it at the oil and gas industry. As that slows down, we will want to attract people from that who already got some awareness of spills and risk of hydrocarbons and explosion risks and things like that into our industry. I'd like to see us attract people from the forecourt industry. As forecourts maybe become electric hubs, there's going to be contractors there whose staff could re-roll and join the spill and pollution response industry. I'll be looking also to attract people from the armed forces, as many companies already do. I'd be looking, as our industry gets more complex, we'd certainly be looking to attract decent graduates with relevant degrees who can come into this industry. But there's loads of others. Marine industry, we can attract people from that. So there's lots of areas that we can market, and I think that's part of the role of the association, is to support that. So basically, that's what we're proposing. Now the floor is yours, and if you've got a question, please pose it. And you can unmute and come on screen, and then we can see who you are. Any questions, anyone?
Hi, Mark. This is Liz from
Hi, Liz.
Oracle. Hiya. I've got quite a few questions, really. One of them is obviously to increase the number of people in the industry and diversity. Apprenticeships are always a good thing. Do you think it would fit in with a kind of an apprenticeship scheme at all?
Now, one thing we're doing next week is we have our annual conference, which is on the 10th of November up in Nottingham. We're going to be obviously discussing this more widely at the conference, and I hope we get good feedback from it. Feedback to the group is really, really important, because we need your feedback on what you think of what we're proposing. This webinar really sits hand in hand with the consultation document that we've sent out, so which is why we've been recording it, and we'll then stick it online with the consultation document, so people can see the two together. Really, what we're trying to do is just to help solve the resource issues within our industry, at the same time align the career pathways between marine, inland and consultancy, such that there could be, if nothing else, migration of people between the different industries, and we don't lose people out of the industries. And that's it, really. I'm really just keen on getting your feedback so that we can just make the industry better, really. Anyone got any feedback? I don't see anything in chat. And anybody any questions, or is that enough?
Mark, can you hear us here?
Yeah, we could, whoever asked that question, we could hear you.
I didn't know whether Mark could hear us. Mark, can you hear us? Apparently not.
Anybody got anything?
You can hear us.
Anybody there?
Yeah, with Mark.
Do you want to pop it in the chat? Yeah.
Elizabeth from Oracle has said, do you think apprenticeships would fit into the scheme? I think no. I think the scheme, I would encourage people to do apprenticeships, definitely encourage people to do apprenticeships, but I think they are actually the introductory stage of getting people into the industry, such that they can then move on to one of the career pathways. Anybody, anything else? I'm not hearing. Let me see if. Right, hang on. Let's. Now, audio settings. Maybe I'm not hearing you. Right, sorry, I've turned my volume up. Sorry, anybody got any questions? I might hear you then. Sorry about that. Sam, have you got any questions?
No, I've been sort of involved with the process though, so I was fairly sort of au fait with what I was expecting to hear today anyway. But there's a couple
Okay,
of questions in the chat there about timeframes mainly, it seems.
I think the time. All right, okay. Rory Giggs. Yeah, seems quite a long time to get chartered. What is the difference in requirement between getting chartered environmentalists through this or the IES through the traditional route? It depends really. I think it depends on what you start with. In general, when we spoke with the Institute, I think I've taken the time frame to get those particular certification pretty much based upon how long it takes people to move up the marine ladder. Now, it depends. If somebody comes to presents, if you like, their file of experience and their logbook of experience, and we can push them forward to the Institute, and the Institute can certify or issue the certification earlier than that expected. I think that would be fine. But I'm talking to, people on the consultancy side. I understand that chartered environmentalists are certainly not in their 20s. They're usually in their early 30s. So would that be correct? Would that be correct? Anybody got some experience of that? Certainly, I know that people want to become chartered engineers. They're certainly doing it in their sort of late 30s and 40s. But I think there are chartered environmentalists in the industry, but they've usually come through that chartered route because they've more been the time served and they've developed their knowledge and experience whilst working in the industry, as opposed to having gone and got a bachelor, having been to university and got a first degree or a master's degree. So obviously people who've done that route are further ahead in that qualification scheme. Don Holdridge starts, have you prepared or are you preparing a logbook template for CPD? Yes, I'm talking at the moment with the chartered, the CPD people about what we should provide. And what I'm trying to do is to see if we can purchase access into an online, which everybody would then have an online account into which their logbook and their training goes. So it's held electronically. It might be administered possibly by ISAS, or it might be managed by the association, such that we can then, they have access to it, but we keep an overview of it whilst ensuring data protection and data protection primarily. Elizabeth said, do you have any idea of current numbers of people in the industry and whether you would be able to meet training demands? Yeah, good question that. It depends how many. There are certain large employers in the industry, people like Admiral Allen, who've got over 1,000 employees, but roughly of those, probably 200 are involved in spill response. And if I look at Oil Spill Response Limited, they've got about 400 employees, of which half of those are involved in a spill response role. So I would think within the industry as a whole, we've got probably 2,500 people. In terms of the training demand, I think the training demand can be met within the training resource within the industry, provided the training resource is motivated to provide the courses to the students that are going to need to go on them, and to invest in the provision of more complex courses, because that's what they'll become. So I think the resource can be met within the industry. I don't think, and I think we would be able to meet the training demand.
Someone's asked about who's going to provide the training as well, Mark.
I think it's really up to what we have. We are hoping that the existing accredited trainers will produce the courses, which will, knowing full well that they're going to have a demand for those courses because people are going to adopt this training scheme. So it's a slightly chicken and egg at the moment. If this is voted on at conference and it's approved, then we'd like to start rolling this out in the first quarter of next year, which means people are probably going to want to go on to training courses, are going to want to go on to training courses in the second quarter of next year. So we're talking, probably 5 to 6 months away. Bear in mind that some of the training providers are already running more complex courses, and I know that Oracle, I know that Compass, their advanced tactical course with tweaking and probably the addition of a little bit more content will be well suited, providing that sort of site supervisor middle training level.
Is that, would it be a sort of fixed presentation that you'd expect that all companies to give the same course, as it were?
No, I think there would have to be a common syllabi. In other words, what needs to be covered, but people will want to teach them in their own style, I suspect.
Yeah, so it'll be similar to the current accreditation.
Yes, it will be, but there will be a syllabi which people have to follow.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, and we haven't evolved in detail that yet, because I think it's slightly, at the moment it's more important to listen to what people say and the feedback that they have before jumping into writing course syllabi.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
We have had we've had discussions within the working group and with as you were on the meeting we had on the trainers, there is a need to agree a common syllabi. But actually how it's delivered is going to be up to that individual company. But obviously it needs to be at the right, pitched at the right level.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's chat about how long it takes for people to get their chartered environmentalist. I think if people can come through and they can demonstrate sufficient competence to go through the IAS when they're in their 20s, it probably means that they probably come into the industry with a master's qualification or a doctorate. But yeah, I mean, if we can get people through faster, then I'm really supportive of that. But yeah, I mean, I think being a chartered environmentalist should be something aspirational. It shouldn't be something that you get awarded with your cornflakes when you've done your, I think it needs to be something which is aspirational. But in theory, yes, with Chartered Institute of Water and Environmental Management, they're saying, yeah, 5 years experience, but to do that, you've also got to have a degree. So not everybody in the industry will have a degree. So this is this is more of we're looking for people who more vocationally motivated than they are necessarily a certification motivated.
I think there's a question there as well, Mark, on how would you assess where people are in the pathway now?
I think I think you would certainly look at, if you look at what we are, if we look at what a site supervisor has, we're saying a site supervisor should have, and one of your site supervisors certainly has all of that, together with a logbook of experience and supportive training, and can demonstrate competence, then he doesn't need to bother with the registered environmental technician. He should be going straight for registered environmental practitioner.
So would it be a case then that all companies who have spill responders would need to send a summary sheet for each person who's currently a responder, and then the industry could assess what level they would be at?
I think it's a little bit more grown up than that. I think companies will be able to assess where their individuals are on their pathways based around what the expectations are for their experience and their competence and their formal training. Because we have to bear in mind that training doesn't equal competence. I think you need experience and you need some time doing the task to actually demonstrate that you end up with competence. And I think that those things are sometimes missed in the provision of training. That might
I appreciate that, but what I'm trying to understand is for companies who have spill responders currently, how would they get their current responders sort of level certified?
I think what you do is the individuals, and I think it should be focused on the individual. The individual should put together this logbook of knowledge, if you like, this logbook of competence, both from the spills he's done, the experience he's gained, the training courses he's got. And I think we can assist in providing hopefully an online platform which enables that to be built, such that he can then present it into the association. It can be assessed by people within the association, and we can say, you probably need a little bit more of this or a little bit more of that. And we'll do that in conjunction with the Institution of Environmental Sciences to start with, because we've got to make sure that when we submit profiles for them for certification, that we're not wasting their time.
No, okay, that's excellent, thank you.
Yeah, but that's certainly the intent, is we want people to get this stuff. We want people to develop independent certification, because that's good for them, it's motivational to them, and they can see that they're progressing along the pathway.
Yeah.
John Bowles asked a good question. I was wondering if there are plans for the accreditations and the benefits of employing consultancies with these accreditations to be discussed with the industry employers or third parties who exploit consultants such as us. Yes, very much so. I think what we're trying to do at the moment is we're trying to educate agencies, insurers, local authorities, devolved nation regulators of the need for competence in doing tasks. And it's a slow process, and it will take time. And this is partly along that way, so that when people turn up to do particular jobs, there should be an expectation from whoever they're working for, insurer, regulator, whatever, that actually someone who's turning up will have a certain degree of competence. And that competence is matched both with experience, which they can demonstrate through the way they do the job, but also independent certification. And therefore, there is an expectation on the company who is doing the work that the regulator is going to treat them with the respect and the insurance and the client with the respect which sometimes they don't get treated. And this because there is not the level of respect for the experience that sometimes people have, because they can't demonstrate it with a formal certification. And I think that devalues the competence of the people within our industry. And it's and in some of the meetings I've been into, it's been sort of quite hurtful to hear the way that some people talk about the experience that we have in the industry. What is happening through the working groups that we're doing and the liaison with the regulators and the fire chief council and all that sort of stuff is people are beginning to realize there's a huge level of competence and knowledge within the industry, which many of the organizations which they work for don't have. And that if they can mine the knowledge of if they can mine the knowledge within our industry, they will benefit through that exchange of knowledge and end up with better regulation and better practical application of how things should be done, because they've learned from the experience which we have within the industry. We're slowly winning the game, but the game has got a long way to go. And in fact, the Emerging and Future Risk Working Group, which is Environment Agency, Fire Chiefs, National Fire Chiefs Council, UK Health Security Agency, and will hopefully grow into being all of devolved nation environmental agencies, is now going to start producing plans for, let's say, and the current one is lithium-ion batteries. How do you deal with a lithium-ion battery fire on a car? You do X, Y, Z, but actually integral into that is the use of a ISAS accredited contractor to manage all the waste arising from that incident so that it's disposed of correctly and doesn't just go down into a drain, which goes into a ditch, which then pollutes a farmer's field because that's the runoff from it. And as we get into some of the more of the other products which are going to be coming in as propulsion fuels, it's going to get more complex. But what we're trying to do with those is agree across the whole of the United Kingdom how incidents will be dealt with when they involve certain risks. And the fire service absolutely welcome this because there's a lack of certainty in how things are. And we want to do this with all emerging products which pose an environmental risk, where there is likely to be public health involved, or a risk to health or a risk to the environment. So yeah, so that's what we're trying to do. Quite ambitious, but I think we've started, and you've got to start somewhere. And I think the feedback from what we're trying to do is going to be positive. And this will feed directly into why we need competent responders who can demonstrate their competence and be given the risk, so they know when they go to the incidents how they're going to deal with it. Right. Any more, or have we exhausted it? We've nearly done an hour. But I'm sure things will arise. If there are, feel free to email. I'll be editing this this recording. It will end up going up on site. We're on the website with the consultation document. Feel free to share it. Feel free to share the feedback you've got straight into my email address, info@ukeirespill.org. We want to get feedback. We want to make this work. We want a positive. We want this to have a positive effect across the industry. And the more that you're involved in helping shape that, the better it will be. So if there's no more, then thanks very much indeed for your time. I really value it. And thanks very much for the questions. They've got the old grey cells working, and they've thrown up a few things that we do need to think about. But thank you very much indeed. I really appreciate your time, and have a good evening. And for those who are not in, if anybody wants to go karting on next Wednesday evening, it's a 450-meter course. You'll be going over, I don't know, at least 40 miles an hour in your go-karts. And it's completely free because it's been sponsored by NRC Environmental, for which we're very grateful, Mark Shepherd. There is a space, there is a team slot available, or I can put composite teams together. Anyway, thanks very much. Have a good evening, and hopefully see some of you at the conference next week. Good day.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you very much indeed, all.
Thanks, Mark. See you next week.
Yeah, see you next week. Looking forward to it.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Cheers.